Tech can be confusing. Whether it's the tech from today,
and we are calling it iPhone,
or even the tech from yesterday.
Hi, this is the Bell System's new touch-tone dialing.
Let's make it easy. This is the Byte-Sized podcast. All right, so picture this. It's 2011, smartphones are already kind of a pretty big deal, but how we interact with them is still pretty much all about tapping and typing. Then, Apple rolls out the iPhone 4S, and along with it, a feature that feels like it's beamed straight from a sci-fi movie. Siri. Suddenly you could talk to your phone, and it would talk back. Siri, what's the weather? Siri, set an alarm. Siri, text my friend, I'm 5 minutes away. It was a genuine wow moment for a lot of us. It put the idea of a voice assistant into the hands of millions. Now, here's a fun fact. Siri wasn't actually born inside Apple. It started life as a standalone app, developed by a startup of the same name, which Apple then acquired in 2010. So, Apple saw the potential, brought it in-house, and integrated it deeply into the iPhone. And just like that, the landscape of personal tech felt different. But how did Siri and, well, the other voice assistants like the Google Assistant, Amazon's Alexa, and Microsoft's Cortana actually work back then? Because it's a fascinating system, and understanding it really helps appreciate how much things are changing with the newer AI models that we'll talk about later. When you invoked Siri, a multi-step process is kicked off. First, your spoken words had to be translated into text that a computer could process. This is speech to text. Your phone would capture your voice, and often, because the real heavy lifting was too much for the phone itself, that audio would be zipped off to a powerful server in the cloud. Those servers would then use complex algorithms and acoustic models to transcribe your speech into written words. Once your command was in text form, the next and arguably most crucial step was natural language understanding. The model would primarily focus on two things. First, your intent. So what's the overall goal here? Are you trying to get information such as, what's the capital of Spain, or control a device function like set a timer for 10 minutes? Second, the entities. These are the key pieces of specific information within your command that the assistant needs to fulfill the intent. If your intent is get directions, the entity would be the destination address. If it's play a song, the entities would be the song title and maybe the artist. Unlike the future LLMs that we'll talk about later, these assistants weren't about actually understanding in the human sense. It was more like incredibly sophisticated pattern matching. The system was trained to recognize words and sentence structures that corresponded to a vast library of predefined commands and capabilities. It was like trying to fit your spoken request into a pre-existing slot. If your request mapped neatly to one of those slots, great. If not, well, that's when you'd hear the familiar,
"Sorry, I didn't quite get that."
And we've all been there, right? You ask something slightly out of the ordinary and the assistant just gives up. It felt like you had to learn Siri's or Alexa speak to get reliable results. You were kind of reverse engineering how it wanted to be spoken to. If the system did manage to figure out what you wanted, the system would then move to action and fulfillment. This meant actually doing the thing you asked. Whether it has to talk to a database for an answer or interfacing with another app on your phone, such as the calendar or the music player. And finally, to complete the interaction, the assistant would then use text-to-speech to convert its text-based response back into audible words, delivering that now iconic, often calm and collected voice. It made voice a viable way to interact with our devices, but it definitely did have its ceiling. It was more about recognizing commands than true conversation. But this leads us to today's modern technology, the massive leap to large language models. It sounds intimidating, right? Large language model. But the basic idea behind how they work is actually something you've interacted with almost every single day, probably without thinking about it much. You know when you're typing a text message or maybe an email on your phone, and right above your keyboard there's that little bar suggesting the next word you might want to use? So you type, "I'm heading to the," and it might suggest store, gym, or park, based on what you commonly type or what makes sense in that context. Now, imagine that predictive text capability, but instead of just being trained on your typing habits and a basic dictionary, it's been trained on a vast amount of text. We're talking about books, articles, websites, conversations, scientific papers, a huge chunk of everything humanity has ever written down and put onto the internet. That's the large in the large language model. These LLMs process all that information and learn the patterns, the relationships between words, the context in which words are used, styles of writing, how ideas connect, and so on. They become incredibly sophisticated at one fundamental thing: predicting what word or sequence of words should come next to form coherent, human-sounding language. So, what happens when you take this incredibly powerful predictive language capability and plug it into a voice assistant? Instead of just trying to shoehorn your request into a narrow, predefined box, an LLM-powered assistant can understand much more complex and nuanced natural human language. Think about it. If an LLM is good at predicting the next word in a sentence based on the previous words, it's also becoming much better at understanding the overall meaning and intent of a sentence someone just spoke, even if it's phrased in a way it hasn't heard a million times before. Suddenly, the assistant isn't just listening for keywords like weather or location. It can start to grasp the subtleties. You don't have to talk like you're filling out a form anymore. You can be more conversational, more rambling, more, human. The impact is that voice assistants are moving from being simple command takers to something much more like actual conversational partners. If you take Gemini and tell it, turn on the kitchen lights and, maybe don't turn on the lamp in there, it'll actually understand what you mean by that command, whereas before it would get very confused and lock up. I find this fascinating, especially when you compare it to old methods of controlling your home, like the clapper. Remember that thing? You would clap, and simply based on the sharp tone, it would count how many times you clap and turn on whatever device it was plugged into. These LLMs are amazing, and I can't wait to see where we go from here. And that's your bite-sized breakdown for today. Catch you next time on the Byte-Sized Podcast.